These are the brutal realities of what space does to the human body that NASA doesn't want you to panic about. Every astronaut who ventures beyond Earth's protective embrace becomes a test subject in humanity's most extreme experiment. When Scott Kelly stepped aboard the International Space Station in March 2015, he was about to become the poster child for human endurance in the cosmos. His mission spanned 340 consecutive days in space, while his identical twin brother Mark remained on Earth as the perfect control subject. What scientists discovered when Scott returned would fundamentally change our understanding of human survival beyond our planet. Scott's story is just one piece of a much larger puzzle that spans decades of human space exploration. From the earliest cosmonauts to today's ISS crew members, we've been systematically documenting how the hostile environment of space wages war against the human body. The statistics are sobering. Within just 5 to 11 days in space, astronauts can lose up to 20% of their muscle mass without rigorous exercise. Their bones begin deteriorating at a rate of 1 to 2% per month. After 6 months in microgravity, an astronaut's skeleton shows the same signs of osteoporosis as an elderly woman on Earth. These aren't minor inconveniences. These are fundamental changes that challenge the very architecture of human biology. The moment you arrive in space, something strange begins happening. For your entire life, gravity has been pulling blood and other fluids toward your feet. Your cardiovascular system has evolved intricate mechanisms to pump blood upward against this constant downward force. Remove gravity, and suddenly all that fluid redistributes toward your head and torso. The result is immediate and unmistakable. Astronauts develop what's called moon face, a puffy, swollen appearance as fluid accumulates where it was never meant to be. This fluid shift creates problems far beyond cosmetic concerns. Roughly 45% of all humans who have flown in space experience space adaptation syndrome within their first few days. The symptoms read like a medical nightmare: severe nausea, vomiting, headaches, and complete spatial disorientation. Your inner ear, which has spent a lifetime calibrating balance based on gravity's constant pull, suddenly receives contradictory signals from your eyes and other sensory organs. The first recorded case was cosmonaut German Titov in 1961, who spent a miserable day in orbit fighting waves of nausea. 60 years later, despite all our technological advances, we still haven't solved this fundamental incompatibility between human physiology and the space environment. The real horror show begins with longer exposure. Your bones, those seemingly solid structures that have supported your body for decades, begin dissolving from the inside out. Without the constant stress of bearing weight against gravity, your skeleton starts cannibalizing itself. Weight-bearing bones like those in your spine and hips suffer the worst damage, losing up to 20% of their mass during a 6-month mission. After Russian cosmonaut Valery Polyakov spent 437 consecutive days aboard the Mir space station, still the record for the longest single spaceflight, his bone density had plummeted so dramatically that recovery took years. When he finally returned to Earth in March 1995, Polyakov made a point of walking the short distance from his Soyuz capsule to a nearby chair, refusing to be carried. He wanted to prove that humans could still function after such extended exposure to microgravity, that we might actually be capable of working on Mars after a long journey. Here's the truly frightening part. After a 3 to 4 month mission, it takes approximately 2 to 3 years to regain lost bone density. Scientists still don't know whether bone recovers completely. We're essentially asking astronauts to sacrifice pieces of their skeleton for the advancement of human knowledge. The muscle loss is equally devastating. Without resistance from gravity, your muscles begin atrophying within days. The heart, which is itself a muscle, starts losing mass and strength. The result is a cascade of cardiovascular problems that can persist long after returning to Earth. Consider the case of NASA astronaut Frank Rubio, who holds the American record for the longest single spaceflight at 371 days. When he returned in September 2023, his body had undergone changes that would normally take decades to occur naturally. His cardiovascular system had been fundamentally rewired by the absence of gravity. To combat these effects, astronauts aboard the ISS exercise for an average of 2 hours every day. They're strapped into specialized equipment that simulates weightlifting and cardiovascular training. Even this intensive regimen can only slow the deterioration, not prevent it entirely. Studies have shown that exercise alone cannot suppress the increase in bone resorption that occurs in space. Then there's the issue that's keeping NASA scientists awake at night. What's happening to astronauts' eyes? Approximately 70% of astronauts aboard the International Space Station experience some form of vision problems. The condition has its own ominous medical designation: spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, or SANS. Here's what's happening. The fluid shift that causes moon phase also increases pressure inside the skull. This elevated pressure begins crushing the optic nerve and physically deforming the shape of the eyeball. Astronauts develop folds in their retinas, swelling in their optic nerves, and flattening of the back of their eyes. NASA astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria experienced a 1.5 diopter shift in his vision after 7 months aboard the ISS, equivalent to aging a decade in accelerated time. Some astronauts have reported persistent vision changes that last up to 7 years after returning to Earth. A survey of approximately 300 astronauts revealed that 23% of short-duration shuttle pilots and 48% of long-duration ISS astronauts experienced varying degrees of near-visual acuity decline. NASA considers SANS one of its red risks for Mars missions because of its potential severity and the number of astronauts who could be affected. The psychological toll of spaceflight creates its own category of challenges. Imagine being confined in a space roughly equivalent to a large moving van for months or years, surrounded by the same people, breathing recycled air, eating rehydrated food, and knowing that Earth is a rapidly shrinking blue dot in an ocean of cosmic darkness. Canadian astronaut David St. Jacques captured this isolation perfectly. You're very, very far away from the people you love on Earth, and that can make you sad. The clinical language barely hints at the emotional devastation that prolonged isolation can inflict on the human psyche. NASA research concluded that astronauts on a Mars mission will need 25 cubic meters of personal space, roughly the interior of a 17-foot-long moving truck, just to maintain psychological stability. The constant noise aboard the ISS, averaging 72 decibels equivalent to highway traffic, adds another layer of stress that compounds over months. Perhaps the most insidious threat is the one you can't see, hear, or feel: cosmic radiation. Beyond Earth's protective magnetic field and atmosphere, astronauts are bombarded with high-energy particles that slice through their bodies like invisible bullets. During a typical 6-month ISS mission, astronauts absorb approximately 72 millisieverts of radiation. To put that in perspective, the average person on Earth receives about 2 millisieverts per year from natural background sources. A 3-year Mars mission could expose astronauts to over 1,000 millisieverts, enough radiation that NASA's own models predict more than a 3% chance of dying from cancer. The radiation doesn't just increase cancer risk, it can trigger bizarre visual phenomena as cosmic rays strike the retina directly, causing flashes of light where none exist. More concerning, the radiation may be causing cognitive changes that we're only beginning to understand. Scott Kelly's twin study revealed some unexpected findings that challenge our assumptions about space-related damage. While scientists expected to find his telomeres, protective caps on chromosomes, shortened by the stress of spaceflight, they actually grew 14.5% longer during his time in space. His immune system showed signs of hyperactivation, and thousands of his genes changed their expression patterns. When Scott returned to Earth, most of these changes reverted to normal, but some persisted for months or even years. The implications are staggering. Space doesn't just damage the human body, it fundamentally alters it at the genetic level. The immune system suffers particularly devastating effects. 50% of astronauts on short-duration flights and 65% on long-duration missions shed live infectious varicella zoster virus in their saliva, the virus that causes chickenpox and shingles. Their natural killer cells, which normally destroy cancerous and infected cells, show 50% reduced activity compared to people on Earth. This immunosuppression creates a perfect storm of vulnerability. Astronauts become walking petri dishes for viral reactivation while their body's ability to fight off infections dramatically decreases. The closed environment of a spacecraft amplifies these risks, creating the potential for medical emergencies that could doom an entire crew. Russian cosmonaut Oleg Kononenko, who holds the record for most total time in space at over 1,100 days across multiple missions, represents the extreme end of human space exposure. When asked about his motivation, he simply said, "My entire life is flying in space." Even Kononenko acknowledges the toll. Each mission requires extensive recovery time, and the cumulative effects on his body remain largely unknown. The recent publication of 44 research papers across multiple nature journals in June 2024 represents our most comprehensive understanding yet of spaceflight's effects on human biology. Over 200 researchers contributed to this massive undertaking, examining everything from cellular changes to organ system dysfunction. What they found confirms our worst fears. Space is fundamentally hostile to human life. Every body system suffers measurable damage. The musculoskeletal system weakens, the cardiovascular system struggles to adapt, vision deteriorates, the immune system fails, and the brain itself undergoes structural changes that persist long after returning to Earth. Yet despite these overwhelming challenges, humans continue venturing into space. The astronauts currently aboard the ISS, like Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, who recently completed an unplanned 286-day stay, represent the cutting edge of human endurance. As we prepare for missions to Mars and beyond, we're essentially asking astronauts to sacrifice their bodies for the advancement of our species. The journey to Mars will expose crew members to radiation levels and microgravity durations that push the absolute limits of human survival. Current projections suggest that astronauts returning from Mars will face significantly elevated cancer risks, permanent vision changes, irreversible bone loss, and potentially cognitive impairments that we're only beginning to understand. The question isn't whether space damages the human body. We know it does, profoundly and permanently. The question is whether the human spirit, our drive to explore and expand beyond our planetary boundaries, is strong enough to accept these sacrifices. Every astronaut who has ever strapped themselves to a rocket and blasted off into the cosmic void has made a fundamental trade, accepting certain physical damage in exchange for pushing the boundaries of human possibility. They become living laboratories, test subjects in humanity's greatest experiment. Space doesn't care about our dreams of becoming a multiplanetary species. It will continue its relentless assault on every astronaut who dares to venture beyond Earth's protective embrace. The only question that remains is whether we're willing to pay the price in human health and suffering to claim our place among the stars. The next time you look up at the International Space Station passing overhead, remember, those aren't just explorers up there. They're pioneers sacrificing pieces of themselves so that humanity might one day call the cosmos home. Space has taught us something uncomfortable but essential. It has shown us with brutal clarity that intelligence and ambition alone do not make us invincible. Our bodies evolved for blue skies, solid ground, and a steady pull beneath our feet. The moment we leave that environment, the illusion cracks, bones weaken, vision bends, immunity falters, and even our genes respond to the strain. And yet, despite knowing all of this, humans keep going back, not because space is safe, not because the risks are exaggerated, but because exploration has always demanded a cost. Every great leap in human history has been paid for with sacrifice, uncertainty, and bodies pushed beyond their limits. Astronauts understand this better than anyone. They don't go to space unaware. They go knowing that they may never fully return to the person they were. As we look toward Mars, lunar bases, and deeper missions into the solar system, the challenge ahead is no longer just technological. Rockets can be built, habitats can be designed, but the real question is whether we can protect the fragile biology that makes us human while we chase the stars. Because space is not waiting for us with open arms. It is indifferent, unforgiving, and honest. So the next time you see a rocket rise into the sky, remember what's really happening. That launch isn't just carrying fuel and machinery. It's carrying human bodies into an environment that actively resists them. And every second they spend up there brings us closer to answering one of the most important questions humanity has ever faced. Not whether we can reach the stars, but whether we can survive becoming a spacefaring species at all.